آنچه مردم در استقبال و پیروی از او کردند به نظر می‌رسد انقلابی‌های حاکم قدری هم دیر به این فکر افتادند و به جز فقره دیدن چهره او در ماه تا به حال معجزه نمایانی برای او ساخته نشده. اقبال مردم به روح الله خمینی که انقلاب 57 را رقم زد هنوز مورد اعجاب و ناباوری قرار دارد و بسیاری از آن به عنوان جنون جمعی ملت ایران نام می‌برند که هنوز کسی علت آن را ندانسته است.
So she's saying like the revolution that happened in 1979 and the amount of love people had for Khomeini and the way they accepted him seems like a mass delusion that even people today are trying to figure out what happened and how that happened. Okay.
متخصص کاری ایشون ناخوندهای مثل ایشون متخصص تعمیقن، یعنی باورهایی رو القا کردن که خب بابایات خیلی تفاوت داشت. مثلا وقتی ایشون گفتن عدالت، برداشت مردم این بود که برای مساوات همه مردم با مساوات رفتار می‌کنن. در حالی که برای ایشون
Yeah, when Khomeini came out and said like we were going to bring justice, people were like happy. People were like, yes, we need more justice. But Khomeini's version of justice was different from what people expected that he means by justice.
عدالت رفتار مساوی با انسان مساوی، رفتار نامساوی با انسان نامساوی بود. در دید ایشون زن و مرد مساوی.
Like when Khomeini was talking about justice, he was talking about treating people who are equal as equal and people who are not equal as unequal. So that's his version of justice. For example, in his view, women are not the same level are not equal to men. So justice would require them to be treated differently. Or Shia or Sunni are not equal. Or Shias who are supporting Khomeini are not the same as Shias who don't support Khomeini. So justice, again, his version of justice is that you treat people equally, but people who are equal, you would treat them equally. If you're not equal, you would not be treated equally.
تمام این تقسیم بندی تو ذهنشون بود، خودشون نمیاد به مردم بگن شما مساوی نیستید، مثلا شما حساب نمی‌کنن. بعد اومدن گفتن
like he didn't say any of these things when he was doing the revolution. We figured all of this out later. But I think he's wrong because people didn't bother to go read his books, because if you actually read his books, you would know that that's what he meant by justice. But people didn't bother reading his books.
Oh,
that's what he's saying. Like he lived in a completely different world. People didn't bother reading his books.
من هموطنای خودم واقعا باور نمی‌کردم. کوچه و خیابان کشور من می‌رفتم با زنای خوش‌پوش صحبت می‌کردم. گفتم اینا نوشته ایشون. رضا شربت داد.
Like he himself before the revolution went to people and he told like he said like he was talking to women who were like modern women, modern dressing women, and he told them like this is what he wrote in his book about women. He was trying to let people know, like people who were supporting Khomeini, he was trying to bring them like, why are you supporting this guy? Do you know what this guy's beliefs are? Look, these are all the people who were supporting. These are the people who were doing the revolution. This is like before, like when Khomeini was coming and people were celebrating his arrival. Like even to this day, I can't explain how this all happened. Like it was a mass. He's like, this was a mass insanity. Like he was like, I don't know how to explain this. It was mass insanity. Oh, and the lady is like, some people say this is like a mass self-execution. I'm not going to use the S word because YouTube is sensitive about that.
بسیاری از مخالفان جمهوری اسلامی بر این باورند که روح الله خمینی مردم، روشنفکران و گروه‌های سیاسی را فریب داد. آنها میگویند او در ابتدا وعده داد که حکومت را به آنها واگذار می‌کند و خود به قم می‌رود و در حوزه به تدریس می‌پردازد.
Oh, this is an interesting part. Okay, this is an interesting part. Okay, so when Khomeini did his revolution, originally he promised that he will do the revolution and then the mullahs will take a back seat and let the people rule the government. Like he promised that the mullahs will not be involved in ruling Iran, will not be involved in the government, that their role was to just mobilize the revolution, and as soon as the revolution is successful, they will go back to doing their religious stuff and they will let the people take over. That's what he promised, okay?
اما روح الله خمینی در رویکردی که بسیاری از آن با نام خدعه یاد می‌کنند گفت اشتباه کرده و دلیلی ندارد که بر سر این اشتباه باقی بماند. او با اعتماد
But when he came to power, he mentioned in a speech that he was wrong to have said that. Khomeini himself openly said that that was a mistake, and just because he made a mistake that he said that they're going to go back home, just because that was a mistake, he doesn't have to repeat that mistake by keeping that promise. So he openly said when I promised you this promise was a mistake, and I'm not going to make a second mistake, and we're going to stay in power.
اعتماد به نفس هراسانگیزی گفت نظر دیگران برایش هیچ اهمیتی ندارد.
من از اول
Okay, so this is not an allegation. Okay, this is a recording of Khomeini's voice. Okay, this is directly what he said. Let's translate. Let me put it on normal speed.
که در این مسائل بودیم و کم کم آثار پیروزی داشت پیدا می شد در مصاحبه هایی که کردم چه
Like early, during the revolution, when it started seeming like we're going to be winning and that we're having victories, in some of the interviews that I had, I'm assuming he's talking about the interviews that he had with Western journalists in Paris when he was in Paris, right?
با کسانی که از خارج آمدند حتی در نجف.
Oh, no, not just in Paris, even before his life so it's like even in Najaf, right? So remember when Khomeini was on exile, when he was forced to leave Iran, first he was in Najaf, Iraq, and then eventually he was in Paris, right? So he's saying even in Najaf. So he was talking to reporters, Western reporters in Paris and in Najaf, and he said to them,
و در پاریس
and in Paris. So in Najaf and in Paris.
چه در حرفایی که خودم زدم این کلمه را گفتم.
And I said these in my interviews with the reporters,
که
with the journalists.
شغلشون یک شغل بالاتر از این مسائل اجرایی است.
He told their journalists that the job of mullahs, right, of religious folk, is superior to government work, is above doing these having this executive role. Like, this is like being involved in government and managing the government is beneath us. So we would not ever rule over a country. That's not our role. He said that's what I said to them.
و اگر چنانچه اسلام پیروز بشد روحانی
And if one day Islam is victorious, by Islam being victorious, he means that if the Islamic Revolution of 1979, if it became successful, so he was saying this before it became successful.
میرن سراغ شغلهای خودشون.
And if the Islam is victorious, the Rohaniyun, the mullahs, will go back to their normal job.
لکن وقتی که ما
However,
آمدیم و وارد در معرکه شدیم
when we came into the field, when we got involved in all of this activity,
دیدیم که اگر روحانیون را بگیم همه برید سراغ مسجدتون
we saw that when we became victorious, when the revolution was successful, we saw that if we tell all the mullahs to go back to their mosques,
این کشور به حلقوم امریکا یا شوروی میره.
this country will be swallowed by the United States or the Soviet Union. So we saw that we couldn't just leave and go back to our mosques.
علیه چیزی نیست که آقایون به ما بگن شما اون روز اونجوری گفتید. راسته ما اون روز خیال میکردیم که در این قشرهای تحصیل کرده و متدین و صاحب افکار افرادی هستند که بتوانند این مملکت را به اونجوری که خدا میخواد ببرند.
We made a mistake at that time when we said that, because we assumed that among the educated elites, the religious elites, the thinkers, right? Among these people, there are who would be able to manage this country in the way that Allah would want, in the way that God would want, right? He said like, we assumed that there would be people we could find that could manage the country in accordance with the wishes of God. But apparently we were wrong. Like some of them were also not that bad. Some of them were good, but unfortunately their decisions were different from what we wanted. Okay? So apparently if you disagree with this guy, you disagree with God.
ما از حرفی که در مصاحبه ها گفتیم عدول کردیم. ما اینطور نیست که هر جا یک کلمه گفتیم و دیدیم مسائل اسلام، حالا ما آمدیم دیدیم اینجور نیست، اشتباه کرده بودیم، بگیم ما سر اشتباه خودمون باقی هستیم.
He's like, we're not the kind of people who, if we make a mistake and say something by mistake, we're not the kind of people that would just be stubborn and stick by our mistake and just continue to do that. Like, we will admit that we made a mistake and we adjust accordingly. So he's basically giving an excuse for why they stayed in power, and they basically by the way, it has nothing to do with the fact that that there's people in power enjoy remaining on power. It has nothing to do with that. Okay, it has all to do with the fact that he saw that this is not going to be the way of God. Okay, so we have to make sure things are the way of God, and that's why we stay in power.
ما دنبال مسائل اسلام هستیم. هر چی میخواد.
Like we are in the interest of Islamic issues, like in line with Islamic issues.
به ما بگن که کشور ملایان.
Like, I don't care what they say about us. If they say like, oh, this is the country of the mullahs, like if they say that like they're trying to make fun of us.
حکومت آخوندی است.
You know, a mullah regime.
و از این حرفایی که میزنن.
If they say these things.
البته این هم یه حربه است برای اینکه ما را از میدان بیدار کنن.
Like they use these words just to push us aside from the from the battlefield.
نه از میدان بیرون نمیریم.
But we're not gonna leave the battlefield.
همونطور که ملاحظه می شود این اعتماد به نفس حیرت انگیز از سر و دست شکستن مردمی مذهبی می آمد که عکس او را در ماه می دیدند و به او لقب امام دادند. اما حالا
like this is he saying like all of this, the lady who's talking saying you can see that they got all this confidence because of all these people who said that you could see Khomeini's image in the moon, and from the people who gave him it called him an imam. Because I don't know if you guys know, like when we say Imam Khomeini, this is pretty insane, like pretty intense when it comes to Shia standards or even Islamic standards. Like, you know, there were 12 imams, okay? So it's pretty normal these days for us to just like know that people refer to Khomeini and Khamenei as imams, right? But these are, unless you're like, these are specifically these were names specifically that was supposed. These are titles that were supposed to be used for the 12 imams. So like after 1200 years of not using these as titles for anybody other than the 12 imams, all of a sudden two people show up and we're calling them, one of them Imam Khomeini and Imam Khamenei. Like it's such a major like she's saying this was such a major confidence boost for them that made them dare do stuff like this. By the way, I know we also call the prayer leader in the imam as well, but that's a different title, okay? But the official title that you're giving to Khomeini and Khamenei as imam basically elevates them to the level of the 12 imams, some would say.
بسیاری از آن مردم میگویند اشتباه کردند و در خیابان شعار مرگ بر مرجع مردم فریب سر میدهند.
But now a lot of people regret their decision and they say something else in the streets. People are like, wait, wow, what?
اشتباه کردند و در خیابان شعار مرگ بر مرجع
مردم فریب. Wow, okay, so this lady is in the streets and she's saying she's protesting and her chant is deaf to the source of Mardom Farib, people's delusion. Or guys, can you give me a better translation for what she's chanting? She's wishing death for the regime and she's calling them the source of delusions, the source of, well, guys, somebody in the live chat, Farib, Mardom Farib, source of people's delusions, source of people conning people, yeah, deluding people. So she's wishing them death.
مردم فریب سر میدهند.
Okay, and apparently the cops show up to arrest her.
Hey guys, if you want to join these streams live, get your comments and questions read by Ali and Armin and the guests, and most importantly, to get full access to the full video versions of all these episodes, become a patron. Link in the description below.